We begin at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Ches Omed Beis. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Heichon Pikdoini. Person comes along and says to a shomer that he gave an object to keep for him, where is my pekadon? Amaloi Ovad. So the person claims that it got lost. So the owner says, Mashbiachani, I want you to swear for me that it got lost. Va'oma Amen. And the shomer responds, Amen. He accepts upon himself the shvua, which that means he swore now that it got lost. Then witnesses come along and testify that he himself ate it. So for denying this, Mishalem Keren, all he has to pay is the Keren, the principal, this pekadon itself. There's no kefil in this case, because kefil does not apply when a person claimed that it got lost. Kefil only applies, we'll see in the next case of the Mishnah, where the shomer claimed that it got stolen from him. If he admitted himself to this that he swore falsely, then Mishalem Keren, he plays a Keren, and V'chaimish V'osham. Because he admitted himself, so he can have a kapara for this, and the kapara is through paying an additional fifth and an osham. As she brings that the pasuk says V'izvada, only if the person confessed himself for swearing falsely, then he has this additional payment of chaimish and an osham. Another case, Heichon Pikdaini, the owner comes to the shomer and says, where's my pekadon? Amaloi, and the shomer claims, Nignav, it got stolen from me. Mashbiyachani, the owner says, I want you to swear for me, Vamam, and he accepted the shvua, and then and then Adam come and testify that he stole it himself. So here, Mishalem Tashlum Kefil, because he claimed that it got stolen from him, and he stole it himself, he pays Kefil. Haide Meyatzmai, if he admitted himself to this, Mishalem Keren V'chaimish V'asham. Then he pays a Keren and a fifth and an Asham. Here, because he admitted himself, there's no kefil. Instead, you just pay a chaimish with a carbon. Zog the Mishnah, another halacha, a goizel les aviv, a person stole from his own father. V'nish baloi, and he swore falsely to his father that he didn't steal. Umeis, and his father then died. And now afterwards, according to Rashi here, afterwards he came and admitted that he stole this from his father. So he has to pay back this geneva, the keren itself, and then a chaimish and a asham, because he admitted now. Who does he pay this to? Lebanov, to the sons of the father, which could be his brothers, or to the father's brothers, even though the father's brothers are not Yershim at all. If he was the only son, so he's the only Yiddish. So if he stole from his own father, and now his father dies, and he's the only Yiddish, so really he shouldn't have to pay back to anybody the Geneva, because he's the Yiddish, so he inherits it all for himself. So why is he paying back? But because he stole, and he needs a kapara, with a keren, chaimish, and asham for what he did, so therefore he still has to pay it back to somebody. He has to give it back either to his brothers, or to the father's brothers, in order to get a kapara. Some Rishonim say that this is min hatayra, for the purpose of him getting a kapara, even though b'etzem it's his, but for the purpose of getting a kapara, he has to give it. Others say that this is a takana derabanan, that in order for him to have a kapara, or in order for him to not steal, so he has to, since he stole, he has to give it back, even though b'etzem he's the Yiddish. Now, if he doesn't want to give this back, and he says, "Look, it's really mine. I'm the Yiddish here," or he doesn't have enough money that he could afford to give this back. So then, what does he do? Loive, he borrows money from someone, and that money that he borrows, the bali chayv that he owes the money to, the percent of this item that he stole here, that he really has as his, as a Yerusha. So let's say he was Yarshaning together with another two brothers. Right? So what percent does he have over here in this item that he stole? A third of it really does belong to him. 2/3 of it should belong to the brothers, but a third of it belongs to him. So over here, the Bali Chayiv, Ba'im and Ephraim, now the person that he borrowed money from can go to the other brothers and collect from them a third of this chayiv that really belongs to this person that stole it. That does belong to him. 2/3 he's chayiv to pay them back because they inherit together with him. But a third of it that belongs to him. So the Baal Chayiv will come and collect from the brothers that third that really did belong to him. Okay, so the point over here is that if this person is not in a position that he's not willing or is not able to lose from his Yerusha that he should really deserve over here, so then he can sort of play this thing. He can borrow money, and in such a way he's not going to end up losing anything out because of his Geneva. He's not going to end up losing out his part of that Geneva. The Geneva that he stole, there's a percent of it that really is his. So when it comes to the payment, we're going to deduct that percent for him not to lose out for this Geneva, which part of it belongs to himself. Similar thing plays out in another case. A person that tells his son, I make a neder, I don't allow you to have any benefit of what belongs to me. So father doesn't want his son to have any anah from anything of his. Now, if this father died, Yirushenu, the son could inherit the father. Because the father only said, don't have anah from me, that's understood to mean when the father is alive. But if the father specified and said, I don't want you to have any anah from me when I'm alive and after I pass away. So if the father passed away, lo yirushenu, he can't yarshin anything from the father. Now, what does this person do? So the part of the Yerusha that really he's supposed to inherit, he has to give it back to the other sons or to the brothers of the father, and he can't take anything. He can't have any anah from this. Now, but if this son has nothing for himself. Rashi says here, what the Mishnah means is he has nothing to eat. And here he got finally a Yerusha, he's going to have some money, and he wants to be able to get a Yerusha and take from his father. But the problem is he's not allowed to have anah from something that comes from his father. So then what do? Similar to what we said before, he can get this Yerusha from his father as long as he gets it in an indirect manner. How is that? Loive, he'll borrow money to go to have what to eat for himself. And then ubali chayv, then the person that he borrowed the money from, bam v'nefram, they'll come and take payment, and a percent of the payment they'll take from the brothers. Also, the percent of that they're going to have to give an extra percent. Also, that this brother that it can't yarshin directly, but now indirectly he's going to end up yarshining because he borrows from someone else. So he's getting the money from someone else, and now that person goes to the brothers and says, "Give me also that portion." Pay me also that portion that this brother was supposed to pay me that portion as well. So now indirectly, he's ending up getting a Yerusha from his father. That's not included in the Isser of him having anah from his father. He's not allowed to have anah from his father directly. But if he's getting it from someone else, and then that someone else comes and takes it from the brothers, takes from the Yerusha, then that's a solution for him to be able to have what to eat. Rav Yosef said about this halacha in the Mishnah, when a person steals from his own father, and so we said he has to pay back even if he's the Yiddish, and he's even the only Yiddish. So really now what he stole, it belongs all to him. But nevertheless, he still has to pay in order to have a kapara. He has to give. So Rav Yosef says, "Afilu la'arniki shal tzedakah." This means even in a case if there's nobody that he could give it to, he has no brothers to give this to return this to. There's no brothers to the father that he can return it to, like the example the Mishnah said. So then let him return it to a wallet to tzedakah. Should go for poor people, but he shouldn't keep it in his own hands. He has to, this is his kapara that he should return it, give it to tzedakah. Rav Papa added and said, he's giving it to tzedakah, has to be for this purpose. It's not just stam giving tzedakah. He has to give it and say, Zeh gezel ozvi, this is what I stole from my father, and therefore now I'm returning it. That's how he gets his kapara. The Gemara, but now here the Gemara has a question on the entire premise of what the Mishnah is saying here. That this Yiddish, he's the only Yiddish, and he stole from his father, but now he's really the one that's yarshining this entire thing for himself. And still the Mishnah says that he has to give it back to who? To the brothers of the father, or here we're saying even to give it back to tzedakah. But the question though is why? Why is this so? Nimchale linafshei, if he now is the only Yiddish, and he taka has an obligation to give back the keren and a chaimish and a asham, to get a kapara, but he can forgive this for himself. If he is the only Yiddish, you only have to give back if it's not forgiven to you. But why can't he forgive it for himself and say, I forgive myself, and therefore I don't have to give back anything? Where do you find such a thing that there's a mechila that works when you steal from someone? So the Gemara brings from a Mishnah we had before. Milait nan, didn't we learn earlier in a Mishnah? Machaloya la keren, v'loy machaloya la chaimish. The Mishnah there talks about the nigzal, the owner. the owner that was stolen from, he is Meichel the Gazlan, the principal, and he's not Meichel on the Chaimish. So the Mishnah there says, so then you don't have to go travel to the place of the owner to give him back the keren, because he was Meichel it. So there, the Mishnah is not talking about a case where the Gazlan is in a position to be Meichel it for himself. It's talking there about the fact that the Nigzal is being Meichel this for the Gazlan, and it works. The Mechila works. Alma bar Mechilahu. So we see that this payment of the keren or the Chaimish, this is something that it could be Meichel. So over here, this son that stole from his father, if he's the only Yairish and now it's his, so he could be Meichel this to himself, and now there's no reason for him to have to be Yaitze, to give it back for a kapara. He was Meichel it. So why doesn't Mechila work here? Amar Rabbi Yechanan, so Rabbi Yechanan answers like Kashya. Contradiction of, basically, we have here a contradiction of our Mishnah that's saying that he can't be Meichel, and the previous Mishnah where it says that the Nigzal is Meichel to the Gazlan, it's not a contradiction. Ha Rabbi Yosi Haglili and Ha Rabbi Akiva. It's an argument between Rabbi Yosi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva whether you can be Meichel or not. Where's the source for this machlekes? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, and here this Braisa talks about the halacha of Gezel Hager, which the Gemara now is going to discuss for the next plot or 2 or 3. So what's the halacha of Gezel Hager? When you steal from a ger, and this ger dies, and he has no one to yarshin him because he had no sons, and he has no relatives because he's katan shenayla dami. So who do you have to return the money to of this ger? So the pasuk says that you return it to a kayin. You have to go and give it to the kayin and the mishmar of that time that serves, as we'll see soon in the Gemara. That's the halacha of the Gezel Hager here. And that's what, so the pasuk says, V'im ein la'ish goyel. A person does not have a relative that can redeem him. L'hashev ha'asham. To return the asham. The asham in this case means to return the money that you stole from this individual. So and this is after the person passed away. He has no relative that you could return this item that you stole. So the Braisa explains, what does the pasuk mean? Is there a person in the world that doesn't have a relative, even a distant relative? Speaking about a ger that didn't have any children, so therefore no, there is no even distant relative that he has, and therefore what do? Like as I mentioned, you have Hakosim Medaber, the pasuk speaking about this is the pasuk that continues and says that you give it to a kain. So now the Braisa says, what happens if the following case plays out? A person stole from a ger. And v'nishbaloi, and he swore falsely that I didn't steal from you. And v'shama shameis hager. He hears a rumor that this ger that he stole from and he swore falsely to him, he heard a rumor that he died. So he was traveling now, he wanted to do tshuva, and he was on his way with his money and with a carbon asham that you also have to bring along with this to Yerushalayim to give now the money to the kayin and also the carbon asham. What happens? Upaga baisa hager. On the way, he meets this ger. He's actually alive. He meets the ger himself that he stole the money from. And now, v'zakfai Allah v'milveh. This ger says, oh, you admit that you stole the money from me. You don't have to pay me right now. If you need the money, you can keep it. But let this be considered. Let's establish it as a loan. You owe me the money. You have to pay me back the money that you stole from me. So it's now established as a loan. Okay, now this point of Zakval of B'milva here is significant. The Gemara will soon discuss this inyan of Zakval of B'milva. This is what happened. The ger, he wasn't totally meichel of his gzela, but yet he told him, you don't have to pay me right now. He established it as a loan. And then umeis, and now this ger dies. Now this Yisrael, this Yid that stole from this ger, never paid him back yet. So this Yisrael now will be Zayche in this money that he stole from the ger that he has in his hands, that was already established before by the ger as a loan. So he's Zayche in his hands. Exactly. Just like the halacha by a ger is that all the possessions of the ger is hefker. So therefore this person can be Zayche in a hefker now. He's the first one. He has it in his possession. So he's Zayche in it. He just keeps it. Doesn't have to give it back to anybody. Divrei Rabbi Yosi Haglili. That's what Rabbi Yosi Haglili says. Rabbi Kiva says, Ein loy takana at sheyotzi gzeila mitachas yadai. He has no takana. If he wants to do tshuva, he has to get this gzeila out of his hands. He's going to still have to go and give it to a kayin. The fact that the ger died, he's not going to be able to take it for himself. Can't keep it for himself. So now the Gemara explains, what do we see over here? What's the machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yosi Haglili? The machlekes over here is regarding this gzeila that you have in your hands, and now this person that stole from this ger, he's the only one that's inheriting from this ger. He's the one that has it. This ger has no other relatives. So could he just be meichel this to himself? Could he just keep it for himself and say that if I owe it to someone, but who do I owe it to? I can just keep it for myself. I'm the inheritor of the ger. The ger has nobody, no other yerishim, so I'm just keeping it for myself. So that's the point the Gemara takes out from this. Rabbi Yossi clearly holds you could be meichel for yourself, and Rabbi Akiva holds no, you can't be meichel this. If you stole, even though you're the one you have the possession of it, and you're the only inheritor, you can't be meichel this. You have to give it back to the kohen. The Gemara explains now. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, loishna lenafshe. It makes no difference if it's a case where you now are in a position that you're the Yiddish and you're being meichel this to yourself. You could be meichel it for yourself. And loishna la'achedim. And it makes no difference also if it's for someone else. Meaning, if it's the nigzal, the owner, that's being meichel it for the gazlan. That was the case of the previous Mishnah, right? But we had the two Mishnayos that the Gemara is talking about. The previous Mishnah was the case where the owner, the nigzal, is being meichel for the gazlan. And the Mishnah here, where we're talking about the son that stole from the father, and now the son is being meichel for himself. He's the only Yiddish here. So in either case, matzi machel. A person can be meichel for himself. Now, so Rashi points out, and we'll see soon in the Gemara will clarify this, even though in the story of the Braisa, it said that the case here was that the ger himself already sort of was partially meichel you, because the ger himself, when you encountered him, zakvel of b'milveh, he already said, okay, this gzeila, we're not going to be considering it a gzeila anymore, it's a loan. You owe me this money, you have to pay it back to me. So the ger himself was already meichel this to some extent. So Rashi says, according to the way the Gemara understands right now, the Gemara is soon going to explain this here. It's lav dafke. The fact that it says zakvel b'milveh, it's lav dafke, even if it was not made a milveh, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, even though you stole from this ger, now that the ger dies, and you're the only person that has it in your possession, you're the Yiddish of the ger, you're taking it mina hefker from this ger, you can be meichel to yourself. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. On the other hand, according to Rabbi Akiva, loishna la'achedim, according to Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't make a difference if it's the owner, the nigzal, that's being meichel for the gazlin, or in a case where the person himself is in a position that he could be meichel for himself, like the son that's now yashning from the father. You can't be meichel the payment of this gzeil. You still have an obligation to pay back the gzeil if you want to have a kapara. And the Gemara explains, as I just mentioned, the pshat and the braisa. According to Rabbi Yossi, the fact that this person that has this gezel from the ger does not have to pay it back after the ger dies, that's even if that detail in the story that the braisa says that the ger himself already made it into a loan, that it did not happen. The fact that the Braisa says that detail there, that's only that's coming to say how far Rabbi Akiva's opinion goes. That even if the ger himself, when he was alive, already established it as a loan, so it's not even defined anymore as gzeila, but nevertheless, since originally he stole this, so no mechila will help over here. The mechila of the ger, the fact that the ger already said that it's like a loan, and you can't be meichel for yourself either, and you're going to have to pay back this gzeila. So we see over here, this explains the machlekes, the stira that we had between the two mishnayos, the mishnah before that says that a nigzal could be meichel for the gazlin, that's following Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, and the mishnah over here that says that you can't be meichel for yourself, that's following Rabbi Akiva's opinion. However, Rav Sheshes asks on this and says it doesn't make sense to say that the difference between these two mishnayos is that it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Why not? Because we have over here the two different scenarios of being meichel here, this gzeila. There's a case where the person is being meichel for himself, and there's the case where the nigzal is being meichel for the gazlan. When the nigzal is being meichel for the gazlan, there's more of a svara that mechila works. He's the real owner. He's the one that you stole from. And then there's the case where the person is being meichel for himself. That's a bigger chiddush that the mechila works, that the gazla now could be meichel for himself. So the Gemara says, if this is how you're explaining, that the previous Mishnah that says that you could be meichel follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and the Mishnah here that says that you can't be meichel follows Rabbi Akiva. So if so, lit Rabbi Yossi Aglili, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that comes and says that you could be meichel for yourself, Lishmi'inon, let the Mishnah come and say the bigger chiddush that lenafshei, that he could be meichel even for himself, and then I would for sure understand that the owner, the nigzal, could be meichel for you. So if you're telling me that the previous Mishnah, where it's coming to say Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, that he could even be meichel for himself, why is that Mishnah only saying the halacha that the nigzal, the owner, could be meichel for the gazlan? I wouldn't understand from that the Gazlan could be Michael for himself. That's a bigger Chiddush. The Mishnah there should have said the bigger Chiddush. The Mishnah there should have said that the Gazlan could be Michael for himself. And from that I would understand, for sure the owner, the Nigzal, could be Michael for you. And then the same thing over here regarding the Mishnah that we just learned here, that's coming to say that you can't be Michael for yourself. Lir Rabbi Akiva, now if we're saying that this Mishnah is coming to say Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Lashmi'inon, let it say the bigger Chiddush, that La'achedim Dulei Matzi Machal, that even the Nigzal for the Gazlan, for someone else, for the Gazlan, that he can't be Michael for him, even though he's the owner. And seemingly, why shouldn't he be allowed to be Michael? Let the Mishnah here say the bigger Chiddush, that even the Nigzal can't be Michael for the Gazlan, and V'kol Shkein, L'navshei D'lei Matzi Machal. And I would understand that he can't be Michael for himself. So why are the Mishnayos saying this in the reverse? When it says Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, it doesn't express his opinion fully. It says the smaller Chiddush. And when it says that according to Rabbi Akiva, that you can't be Michael for itself, it only says the smaller Chiddush. You can't be Michael for yourself. But it doesn't say the bigger point, that even the Nigzal can't be Michael for you. So therefore, it doesn't sound like that these two Mishnayos, one is Rabbi Akiva and one is Rabbi Yossi Aglili. It's not expressing their opinion properly. So therefore, the Gemara here has two Eifanim to explain this. We don't have to say that one Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi Aglili and the next Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva. Both Mishnayos are one opinion, and as the Gemara here will explain, there's two ways how to explain this. So hello, Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes' pshat is as follows. Ha v'ha Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Both Mishnayos here are Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. Now, but there's no contradiction, because Ki Kam Rabbi Yossi Aglili the Matzal Machal. When did Rabbi Yossi Aglili say that when it comes to Gzela, that you could be Michael the payment of the Gzela, Lachedim? That's if the owner, the Nigzal, is being Michael for someone else. He's being Michael for the Gazlan. And that was the case of the Braisa. According to the way the Gemara is explaining now, in the story of the Braisa, the Ger, when he was still alive, he met the Gazlan and he told the Gazlan, I'm Michael B'Gzela, let's consider it just to be alone. And now according to this pshat, that point in the story is significant. The fact that the Ger, when he was alive, said that it's only alone, that's why it could be Michael. And that's the halacha that it said in the previous Mishnah, that a Nigzal could be Michael to the Gazlan. But then this Mishnah here, though, Aval Nafshei, when it's the son that's yashing the father and he wants to be Michael for himself, Loi Matzi Machal. There Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, no, a Gazlan can't be Michael for himself. Ela amai zacha Allah b'meshe b'yodai. So now going back to what it said there in the Braisa, when it said by the Gezel Ager, why was this person zeiche in what he has in his hands? Not because he's being Michael for himself, but as I just said before, mishum dezak v'nol v'milveh. Because of the story over there in the Braisa, as it says, the Ger himself already, when he was alive, he already established it to be alone. It's only the Acherim, meaning the Nigzal, the owner, he has the power to be Michael, the payment of the Gazlan to him. But the Gazlan himself, if he's yarshening now from his father himself, he can't be Michael for himself. So both Mishnayos are according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's one shot. Rava says, no, we could say the opposite. Hava Rabbi Akiva. Both Mishnayos are following Rabbi Akiva. Now, Kiyam and Rabbi Akiva D'lei Matzi Machal. This that we see here in the Braisa. That Rabbi Akiva says that a person can't be Michael the payment of the Gzela. When is that? L'nafshei. He can't be Michael the payment of the Gzela for himself. So now, according to this answer in the Gemara, according to Rava, the Gemara is going back to the understanding that I had in the beginning, that detail that it said in the Braisa, that the Ger, when he was alive, already established it as alone, that's insignificant. He just established it as alone. He was never really Michael anything. The fact that he said that it's alone doesn't mean that he's Michael. So therefore over here, when this Ger dies, who's being Michael the payment of the Gzela? The Gazlan himself wants to be Michael to himself. It's regarding him being Michael to himself. That's when Rabbi Akiva says you can't be Michael for yourself, the payment of the Gzela. But for someone else, meaning the owner, the Nigzal, to be Michael for the Gazlan, that he could be Michael. And that's the previous Mishnah that says that the Nigzal could be Michael. Okay, so now the Gemara, that's the second answer. So now the Gemara says, now what comes out from this? According to this second pshat, and this is really also the original pshat that the Gemara understood. Klal, from this we understand that Rabbi Yossi Aglili Sava, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion is, Afilul and Avshei Nami Motzi Machal. That a person could be Michael, the Gazlan himself, if he is now the only Yidish here, whether in a case if it's a son that stole from his father, or in the case of the person that stole from the Ger, and he's the only Yidish here, for himself he could be Michael. If so, the Gemara asks a very basic and general question over here. If so, El Gezel Hager, The ka'amar achmanan is sin lekayanim heichim eshkachasla. So this entire halacha that the Torah says that if you steal from a ger, and now the ger dies with no relatives, that now this gazlan has to pay it to kayanim, how does that ever apply? This gazlan will just always be meichelet for himself. He's the only Yiddish now. He's being Yiddish at Mena Hefke, and he's just meichelet for himself. When is he ever paying it back to kayanim?
We said according to that's because he made it.
That's the other pshat. That's Rav Sheish's pshat. Rav Sheish says that it's only if the ger, when he was alive, established it already as a milva, right? But not according to Rav's pshat. According to Rav's pshat, that the Gemara just said, So over here, even that the zaknal b'milva is insignificant. It's the fact that the ger could be the gazlan could be meichel for himself. If so, when do we ever apply this halacha that he pays to kayanim? Amar Rave, so Rave will answer you, Hocha b'mayaskinon, or others are going to say Mishkachas law. It will apply in the following case: Keshagazal es hager, when this gazlan stole from the ger, v'nish baloi, and he swore falsely to him about this, and then omeis hager, the ger dies, and before he's meichel anything, v'hoide la'achamise, he was made, he admitted to the fact that he stole from this ger. The moment that he's made to this, Kanei Hashem. The Eibishter is kaina now, the payment of this gzela that he has to pay. The Gemara uses this lashon of Kanei Hashem because that's the lashon that it says in the pasuk when it says that you have to give it to the kain. It says there ha'asham hamushav lashem, and then v'nastal lekainim. The Eibishter gave it that you have to give it to the kainim. So in a case where he was maide, so now he can't be meichel it anymore to himself. Once he was maide already, if he wasn't maide yet, he could be meichel this and just keep it for himself. But once he's maide, the Eibishter is kain it and he has to pay it to the kainim. So now the Gemara goes on from here, because we brought up this case of Gezel Ager, goes on here to discuss this. In the next mission, the Hemshech over here is going to discuss this halacha of Gezel Ager. So Ravina asked the following shaila regarding the stealing from a ger. Gezel or Gazal hagiyotis mahu. If he steals not from a ger, but a giyotis, a female, does the same halacha apply as well, that if she dies and you have no one to pay, that then you have to give it back to the kayin? Isha marachmane v'loy isha. Why is there a shaila about this? Because in the lashon of the pasuk there it says v'm ein lo ish kayel. So maybe that means it excludes a woman. That's a geyitis. Aydilme orche dekrahu. It's just the pasuk is choosing an example, talking about a man, but the same would apply if it's a woman or geyitis. Amalei Ravadan le Ravina. So Ravana says to Ravina, we have a clear brayso about this. Toshama, the brayso says the Tanya ish. When the Torah here uses the expression of ish, enli ele ish. I would think it's only if you stole from a ger and ish that you have to pay back to the kain after he dies. Isha minayin. How do I know it applies to a geyitis as well? Kishoime hamusha. The pasuk there says hamusha. This that you have to return, which is an extra word because it says before that lahashiv ha'asham. Then it says again, Hamushav, Harei Kan Shnayim. This is including another example, which is even a woman that you stole from a Geyitis. In Kei Matamad Leme Ish, why does the pasuk use the expression of Ish? Ish at tzarech lachsa acharav, because what it's saying is that if it's a man, meaning he's a gadol that you stole from, so then you're going to have to first go figure out and see, does he have any relatives, did he have any children that could inherit him, before you're going to say that you give it to the Kayin. Im yesh legaylim im lav, if he has relatives, meaning if he has any descendants. Katan iyat tzarech lachsa acharav. But when it comes to if you stole from a ger, which is a cotton, there's nothing that you have to in search to see if he has any descendants that you would return it to, because he's a cotton, he couldn't have any children, so you know that he has no relatives, and therefore who do you give back the gzela to a kain? Yeah, a cotton could be a ger if he's, there is a case of a cotton being a ger. The Gemara Ksuba says different cases. The Taisus here actually discusses how a cotton can have his own money. Okay, so there are cases as well where a cotton can have his own money that you stole it from him. Tana Rabbanon, we learned another halacha in the Braise regarding this halacha of gezel ager, that you give it to the kayin. So it says Lashem la kayin. You give it to the Eibishter, and then the Eibishter says, who do you give it to the kayin? Kanei Hashem, the Eibishter acquires now this money that you stole from the ger, v'nasna la kayin, and he gave it to the kayin. To which kayin? Sheba'osei mishmar. That's in that group of the kayinim that are serving at that time when he's coming to give back this gzela. You say you return it to that kayin, which is serving then in that mishmar. Maybe the gazlan could return now this money to whichever kayin he chooses. So the pasuk there says, "Mulvad ela kipurim ashiyachaper boy," or that this is this gazlan here. Besides the money that he has to give back to a kayin, he also has to bring a carbon as well. Just like the carbon, who's the one that's going to bring his carbon? The kayin that's there in that mishmar, in that week that's serving, he's the one that brings his carbon. That's also the kayin that you give them back the money to. So that's who the money goes to. How do we know what's going to be the halacha in a case where this gazlan, he's himself a kayin? And now the ger dies, and he has to give it back to a kayin, but he's himself a kayin. So how do you know that this kayin shouldn't say to himself, since the halacha of this gzela, this money has to be given to kayinim, and I have it in my hands, so I'm a kayin, let me keep it for myself. And he says to himself as follows, Vidinu, I'll make the following kavachemer. If it's in the different kayin, or not a different kayin, even just a Yisrael that stole from this ger, and now he has to pay it back. So I could be zeiche in this, if I am the gazla myself, and I have now the money already in my possession, for sure I can keep it for myself. That's what he may think to himself. Or Rab Nassan says that the way this kayin may think to himself and deduce and say that he can keep it for himself, he would say as follows, B'loshan he said it in a different way. If when it comes to a carbon, that he has no portion in this carbon until it's given into his possession. What it's talking about over here is that a kayin that has to bring a carbon. So who gets this carbon? Who does this carbon belong to? The meat of the carbon or the hide of this carbon? So you can give it when you bring this carbon. So there's all the kayanim in the mishmar, and you can choose a kayin that you want to give it to. Now that kayin that you choose, originally he has no portion in this, but you choose this kayin, and then it belongs over here to this kayin. Once you choose that kayin to give it to, that's it. It's his. Now the meat and the hide of this animal that you chose, this kayin should bring the carbon. It belongs to him, even though originally it wasn't his. If so, over here, this gzela, this money that now has to be paid to one of the kainim, and you have also a portion in this, even before it comes into your possession. You're a kayin just like any other kayin that this could be paid to. So if you already now have it in your possession, you are the gazlan, and you already have that money in your possession, wouldn't you say that no other kain can take away this money from you? You're going to say, yeah, I have to pay it to kain, but I keep it for myself. That's what you would think. That's what this kain could say to himself. So for this we answer, loy, this is not the case. If you say regarding a carbon that's being brought, and originally you had no portion in this carbon, and you're being chosen to bring this carbon, before you were designated to bring this as the carbon, you have no portion in this. There's no other specific kind that has any portion in this. So therefore, once you're chosen, there's no other kind that can come and claim it and take it from you. However, when it comes to this money that you stole, just like you originally have a chelik in this, but this money that has to be paid back to kainim can be paid back to any of the kainim. All of the kainim have a potential chelik in this. So therefore, Elos over here, the halacha is, if you yourself, the kayin himself, is the gazlan, since all kainim have a portion in this, here we don't compare it to a carbon that you now were chosen specifically to bring. Over here, this gzela is taken out of your hands, and this money is distributed with all your brothers, with all the kainim, as we said before, the mishmar of the kainim that are serving in that time.
Which means him too, right?
Could include, maybe it includes him as well, but he can't keep it all for himself.
Yeah, right.
You have to divide it amongst all the kainim that are serving in that time. That's the conclusion of the Braisa. So the Gemara asks, but v'haksiv, doesn't it say regarding a carbon that a kain is bringing that v'ish as kadashav lo yiyu? If you're bringing a carbon for somebody, so then the meat and the hide that belongs to the kainim, which kain gets that meat and the hide? The kain that's bringing the carbon. What does Gemara mean to ask by this? Over here, this kain that has this gzela in his hands, and he has to return now this gzela to a kain, besides the actual money that he has to give to a kain, there's also, as we saw before, there's a carbon that he has to bring. The lashon of the pasuk was milvad ela kipurim ashiachapa bayalav. He has to bring a carbon. Who's going to bring that carbon? This kain could bring his own carbon, And when he brings his own carbon, he's going to keep the meat and the hide of his own carbon that he's bringing over here for the kapara for this. So the Gemara is asking, just like he keeps his own carbon that he brings for this purpose, why shouldn't he be able to keep the money as well? And Rashi actually says an interesting thing. Just like the carbon that he's bringing is his, it's the kachim that the Torah says that since he's bringing the carbon belongs to himself, the money, the gezel ager now that he has to return to a kain is also called kachei mikdash. Since it belongs to a kain, it's also like kachim, and therefore this kain should be able to keep it for himself, just like he keeps the carbon for himself. So the Gemara tries to answer and says, "Hacha b'maya skinon." What is this brayso talking about when it says that the kain does not keep the payment of this money for himself? The kain tamei. This is a kain that's tamei, and therefore he's actually not bringing his own carbon. He has to bring a carbon, and another kain is going to have to bring it for him. Just like he's not bringing his own carbon, and he's not keeping his own carbon, so he doesn't keep the money as well. But the Gemara rejects this. Frag the Gemara, but even kain tamei. If this brayso was talking about a kain that's tamei, what did it say in the words of the brayso? Dava sheyesh loy chelik bay. Something that he has a portion in it. But how could the brayso use that expression? Mi islay, does he have a portion in it? If he's a kain tamei and he can't bring his own carbon here, so he's not part of this at all. Ella, so therefore the Gemara concludes and says something else. No, this is a kain tahir. He's bringing his own carbon, but still he does not keep the money over here. Why not? Because we have a drasha for this. Asya lekayin mizdei achuza. We learn out the term lekayin that it says over here that you give this gezel ager to the kayin, and then the halacha of lekayin that it says by zdei achuza, where the Gemara is going to bring up right now that over there as well the kayin does not keep this for himself. What is this halacha of zdei achuza where the kayin may think that he could keep it for himself? The Tanya we learned in the brayso. Okay, so before we see over here what it says in this brayso, the halacha of zdei achuza that we're talking about over here is if a person was makdish a property to hektish, and the person did not redeem it from hektish, but someone else went and bought it off a hektish, not the original owner that was makdish it. When yovel comes, what happens with this property? By yovel, everything goes back to the original owner. But in this case, when you were makdish it to hektish and someone else redeemed it, someone else bought it, yovel, all those properties goes out to the kayanim, not to the original owner. Now, what happens if the one that bought it off a hektish, the one that redeemed it, bought it off a hektish, was himself a kayan? And now yovel comes, and the halacha of this property is that it's supposed to go out to the kayanim. But this person himself that bought it is a kayan, so he says, so let it go to me. That's what this brayso discusses. Let's see. So achuzasai. There's an extra word in the Torah when it speaks about this. It says in the Torah achuzasai. The pasuk there says that v'haya asada b'tzeise b'yovel kodesh l'Hashem kizdei acherem l'kayin tia. It should go to the kayin. Then it has an extra word in the end. It says achuzasai. What's this extra word of achuzasai saying? Ma tamad loima. So the case is, as I mentioned before, how do I know when it comes to a property that you were makdish and someone else redeemed it? And now, when yovel comes, who's the one that it goes to? It's supposed to go to the kayanim in yovel. Now, uga'ala echad min hakayanim. What's if it's a kayan himself that's the one that redeemed this property that belonged to hektish? How do we know that this kayan shouldn't say since this property now in yovel time has to go to one of the kayanim, and I have it in my possession already? I'm a kayan. So let me be that kayan that I should keep it for myself. And he says, "V'dinu." That's a kavachayim. If it was someone else that redeemed it from the hektish, and I'm a kayan, and I also have a portion in getting this, if I'm now the one that redeemed it from the hektish, and now yovel came, shouldn't I be able to keep this for myself? Talmud Laima, that's what the pasuk says. Kistei acherem lakayin tia achuzasai. The Torah adds that word, that extra word achuzasai, to say what? Achuzah shaloi. If you have an inheritance, say you inherited from your father, that's yours. Ve'ein zu shaloi. But over here, this is not an inheritance. This is something that you redeemed from hektish. So therefore, it's not an achuzah, and therefore this will not belong to you. Okay, so what do we do over here? Even if this is the kain himself that redeemed it from hektish, we take it out of its hands and we distribute it amongst all the kainim. That's what it says b'negei to stay achuzah. And there the pasuk uses the term la kain. And over here as well, b'negei to the gezel hager, when you have to pay it to the kain, it also says in the Torah la kain. So that's the gzeira shava to say that if the kain himself is the gazlan, what do? We distribute it to other kainim. This kain can't keep it for himself.